You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the show. It's great to have you, as always, here in the Cabral Concept. And today, we are getting into our Training Thursday edition of the show, where we will be tackling the topic, is it better if you have 3 hours a week or 2 hours a week total to work out twice a week for an hour each, or is it better to split that up and do 4 half-hour workouts? We'll take a look at some of the research, and then we'll look at the practicality of doing this. I think by the end of the show, you'll have a really concrete answer as to what to do, but also why, because it's not always just about what to do, it's why you are doing it. There are so many programs out there right now to choose from. There's so many nutrition plans. There's so many supplements. There's so many of this. It always goes back to the why. Regardless of price, regardless of who's teaching it, doesn't matter. Go back to, okay, is the information sound? And if it is, why, meaning like for who? Why does this matter to me? That's a great question to ask yourself, is like, why does it matter to me? Should I be listening to this information? So what I want to do is make this really simple and clear for you today. I'm going to tackle a topic that we go back and forth in the fitness field about, and that's something called EPOC. And I'll be talking about what EPOC stands for today. We got into interval training, I would say the early 2000s. That's at least when I was really bringing it out with people. And it worked great, right? It worked great. But really for different reasons than EPOC. EPOC is one of the things that we look at, and it still matters. It's kind of like BMI. It's not the end-all, be-all for body mass, in terms of like overall health, but it matters. It absolutely matters. So we can't overlook it. We can't forget about it because it's one of those foundational principles for how effective your workout will be in terms of transforming your body, burning body fats, and really revving up that metabolic engine for the next anywhere from 12 to 31 hours. Okay. So let's go over that today. I think this is going to be helpful too, with just understanding that your body is always looking to achieve equilibrium. That's where the name of the company came from. Equilibrium came from dynamic equilibrium. So I've read thousands of books and just from many brilliant authors. And in the old school naturopathic medicine-based books, it was called The Natural Hygienist back then. They had a different name, but same principles. They always talked about this thing called dynamic equilibrium. And I was like, wow, that's an amazing term. It's like movement, always moving, but trying to stay in the same place, trying to stay level, right? Always moving to stay level. And I love that term. It's like you're always working so hard in life, but it's just to maintain balance. That's all it's about. And that's what your body does. It's creating this homeostasis or equilibrium in your body. And so here's what we want to do though. Your body doesn't want to overextend itself or burn a ton of calories. So it has to calm itself down. And it wants to calm itself down as fast as possible. And if it can do that, it expends less calories. And you don't necessarily like that all the time because you'd rather eat a little bit more food and not gain weight. That's what a lot of people would rather do, right? So we have to look at that. Now, in a normal resting state, we call this the resting metabolic rate of the body. Tune back in. Go to stephencabral.com/podcast. If you type in metabolic rate, you will find my previous podcast on how to calculate your basal metabolic rate and your resting metabolic rate. All right, I want you to check that out. So that's at stephencabral.com/podcast. There's a little search bar. You can search for anything you'd like. And anytime you have questions, you can ask them at cabralsupportgroup.com. So resting state. What does the body need? Well, it needs energy. It requires oxygen, and it expends as little energy as possible for just basic homeostatic processes, such as circulating your blood, breathing to bring in that oxygen and to remove carbon dioxide, to make sure your cells are growing, dividing, apoptosis is taking place to remove the old ones. And it's regulating your temperature as well as working with your brain and nervous system, okay? It's doing that with that little energy expenditure as possible. I want to really reiterate that. Your body prefers to stay alive. That's its goal. It really is. The body's goal as a living organism is to stay alive. That means it wants to get away with cheating and gaming the system as much as it can. So if it can get away with expending 600 calories, 800 calories a day doing that, it's going to. That's what it wants, as little as possible. And that's why it kind of tells you, like, oh, you're expending energy right now. You should just sit down for a little bit. Like, take a load off, right? Just sit down, relax, put your feet up, expend less calories. Because that means we need to not get more. We don't need to work on finding more food when we know, obviously, today it's very, very easy. Those vital functions of the body, they account for about 60%, somewhere between 50 and 2/3, like 50 and 66%, right around 60%. Okay, that's what it's going. What does it matter? Well, it depends on, again, like what type of neural or what type of brain-based power you're bringing for the day. How hard does your body have to pump, for the heart? So that's it, about 60%, we'll say. Now, the rest of your calories burned for the day, energy required, is really going to come from physical exertion. I talk about the 10,000 steps all the time. 10,000 steps, right? That's what it's all about. Get your just daily physical movement in. Not exercise, that's human movement. Then you can add some exercise. We'll be talking about that. And then another big one on top of that, besides your physical movement, is digestion. And I've told you before, again, if you eat less, you're not going to require as much caloric demand, or you're not going to require as much energy expenditure. But that can be 30% of your calories for the day is digestion. Could be less, could be 20%. But really, now you're at about 80 to 90% of everything met. And then there's some other variable factors in there for the last 10%. So that's what makes up how many calories you can eat on a daily basis, because that's your energy expenditure. So when you look at that, of course, age matters, all those things matter. But that's it. Like, those are the predominant movers of how much food you can eat, of how many calories you can spend. Now, some people, Vata body type, that nervous system, it's at a higher level. It's going to require more glucose, more energy. And if you're more of the endomorph body type or the kapha body type, less energy expenditure. That's why your 60% is what you can control, or is what you can control, and that's going to be a little bit lower, right? That's why two people, 5'8", we'll say, one is 120 pounds, one's 180 pounds. The person that's 120 pounds, they could eat the same amount of calories as the person that's 180 pounds. 180-pound person might gain weight. 120-pound person might lose weight. Different body types. People are starting to realize this. They're starting to learn more about it. And we've known this, again, thousands and thousands of years. First in Ayurveda, and then with the different body types as well. Not as predominant in Chinese medicine, but definitely there still. So important to look at it. All right, so that's how our body uses energy. And we'll refer to those energy and calories basically interchangeably, because your body processes calories on the inside for energy, and it takes in calories from the outside, okay, to replace those calories. So now we're talking about oxygen. Oxygen is what we're using to move that body. Now, exercise is what requires the body. There's more demand for oxygen. I think that's the best way to put it. Easiest way to put it is this way. When you're exercising or even going out for a decent walk, your body requires more oxygen. That's a good thing, because when we require more oxygen, think of it as like a gentle wind on a flame. It's going to burn that fire, right? It's going to burn that fire faster. I was just in Maine over this past weekend, Memorial Day weekend, beautiful weekend. Sit outside at night. It's cold. It's crisp. Put out a nice little campfire there in the fire pit. And that fire burned through like 2 cords. That's the name. Cords I was looking for. So it burned through those like nothing, because one night the wind was really up there, and it was just adding fuel to that fire, being the oxygen. More oxygen for the fire makes it burn faster, consumes more wood. Think of the wood as the calories, right? The amount of energy being expired. Well, this is where we get now a term that we use in exercise called excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. And that stands for EPOC. You can see why we say EPOC instead of excess post-exercise oxygen consumption, right? Now, what does that mean? Like, what does that term mean? Well, here's what it means. And this is all that you should take away from this, is that when you do a workout, there's a certain amount of oxygen that's required even when you stop exercising. And the oxygen that's required is in a greater amount than your resting metabolic rate. And until you come back down to that resting metabolic rate, you'll burn more calories even when you're not working out. That's the best way to think of it. You burn calories without even working out. And that happens after a good workout. Now, there are other factors beyond EPOC. EPOC is what I'm going to talk about today. There is increased metabolic demands beyond EPOC that I've spoken about before with interval-based training. And that's why I gave you tips on if you're going to do steady state intervals, which one to do first. If you're going to do your weight training intervals, what to do first. So I gave you that. That's on a previous show. It answers that question through the research. And again, there's a metabolic response as you break down or start to create micro damage with the muscle fibers. That's going to create some type of increased caloric demand. So all of these things matter. Today we're talking about how much oxygen after your workout do you require? What type of workouts are the most important for that? Okay. So here's what we know from the research. That the harder the workouts, the more metabolically demanding, the more EPOC there will be after the workout. So what does this mean? Well, two people. They spend 30 minutes doing cardio. One person hops on a recumbent bike, which is the bike where you're seated with a back to it, you're lean back, and you're just pumping your legs, and you could be reading the newspaper at the same time because it's typically not that metabolic when you're doing a recumbent bike. Your glutes aren't even really as active. You're getting a little bit of hamstrings, a little bit of quads, sure, some calves in there, but that's it. You're not even using your core to stabilize. So you're doing that for 30 minutes. Now, the person 2 bikes over from you is doing an upright bike, and they are doing a 5-minute warm-up. Then they're doing a 1-minute sprint followed by a 3-minute just moving the legs very, very slowly interval. So 1 minute on, 3 minutes just moving the legs very, very gently. Then 1 minute all-out sprint. And then 3 minutes moving the legs very, very gently. And then they're doing that again. And they do that for, I have to do the math in my head right now, they do that 6 times. So that 6 times equals times 4, that's 24 minutes. Because it's 1 minute work, 3 minutes moving slowly on that bike. That's 4 minutes. They did 6 rounds. That's 24 minutes. They did their 5-minute warm-up, and they're going to do about a minute or 2 cool down. All right? That's it. Which one of those 2 people do you think will have a greater metabolic demand after the workout? Well, most likely, hopefully you answered, the person doing the harder work. Whatever is more physically demanding on the body that elevates the heart rate to above 80% of their max VO2. So if we look at that, and we're trying to figure out max VO2, I've given you that formula before, but the simplest way is just 220 minus your age, and then you get your number, which is your 100% of your max VO2. It's not perfect, but it's close. And then you take 80% of that. And that's it. Now, again, you need to work your way up to this, but let's say you're 40 years old, 220 minus 40 is 180, and then 80% of 180. Now I'm asking myself to do math. I'll do simpler math. 8 times 20 is 160. So it's going to be a little less than that, right? If I pull up my calculator, we've got 80 times 0.8, and we've got 144. So there we go. So that would be your 80%. So during your 1 minute sprint, you'd work your heart rate up to about 140 or so, 145. Again, this assumes that you're fit, that you've done this before. And then you let your heart rate come down and then you ramp it right back up. This is called interval training. This is just one example. A lot of times with beginners, I prefer a 20-second sprint with a 40 or 60 seconds kind of lightly moving those legs on an exercise bike, right? Just lightly moving the body. That's it. Letting the heart rate come back down. So there's many different ways to do it. You can do Tabatas, etc. And done shows on that. So This way, though, creates a massive energy expenditure for the body because you're creating more. Well, here's what you're doing is you're moving more of the muscles in your body, which are requiring more oxygen, which is requiring more of what's called a metabolic disturbance. It's disturbing your current resting metabolic rate. Think about it. If you're seated back in that recumbent bike and you're just reading the newspaper and you're enjoying yourself, maybe having a conversation on your phone, that we don't like those people. Every once in a while, I'm one of those people. Put my headset on and I'm talking with someone on my team. But anyway, what I'm saying is that person isn't too far away from their resting metabolic rate on that bike. They're really not. So they're not going to have that much EPOC after their workout, which means they're really not going to burn any more calories once they're done with that energy expenditure on the bike. What I want is for you to finish your workout, there to be a little bit of micro tears in the muscles, which is going to require there's some metabolic damage, which will require more repair. That's disturb the metabolism a little bit. Only make you stronger in the long run as long as you get enough nutrients, enough sleep. And it's going to allow you to burn more calories after the workout. Plus, it's going to deplete more glycogen, which allows you to eat more carbs. So this is literally the best of all worlds. Now, at my studio in Boston, and what we do just for recommendations, is most of this is done not on a cardio piece of equipment, but actually with weights or bands or your own body weight. We're doing supersets or trisets or a circuit of 5 exercises, and we're creating this same metabolic disturbance. So over a period of a minute or a couple minutes, if we're doing a weight training circuit, we're getting that heart rate elevated. Clients will get it to 140, 150 beats per minute. And then we give them that time to rest. Then we repeat the circuit or the triset. This is a great way to get an interval cardio in with your weights. And we call this metabolic resistance training. It's absolutely phenomenal. And this isn't something new. Again, we've been doing this. I've been doing it. And again, people have done it before me. But I've been doing it since the late 90s. 2000 full-time. So that's how I look at it, is that these things have been really tested, really tried and true. They were being done before the Tabata research came out, and it's only getting better. I mean, it really is. So I don't want you to think that, the jury's still out. We don't know if this is the right thing to do. Interval-based training, whether you're doing it with weights like resistance, just your body weight, or TRX, or kettlebells, or dumbbells, or bands, pick whatever you enjoy. I'm okay with any of it. It's all great. Just make sure you're moving those big muscles, right? Those major muscle movers, chest and back, quads, hamstrings, glutes. Get those muscles moving, right? That's what's going to burn up a lot of your energy-based reserves, which means then you get to eat and you get to refill those reserves without putting on any body fat. That's the fun part. So this is what we're looking at. I think EPOC, and rightly so, got too much of the credit, maybe in like the 1980s, but for sure, by the time we got to 2000s and really 2005, 2007, I remember that EPOC was only part of the equation, but it was a big part. It allowed us to understand that the harder your workout, the more intense it is, the better it is in terms of caloric expenditure and energy use. And that came from the excess post-exercise oxygen consumption, meaning like the additional oxygen needed away from your resting metabolic rate. So when I talk with people and then they say, well, what if I did like a really hard interval workout for an hour or an hour and a half once a week? It doesn't count. So one is that's too damaging on the body. So that's too much of what we call a hermetic stressor. And I talked about that a few Thursdays ago on this show. Too much, okay? Too much damage. We see that. We call it, the weekend warrior thing, right? You go really hard on the weekend. Well, it's also probably leads to more heart attacks and other issues than anything else, because sedentary 5 days a week, 6 days a week, and then you go really hard 1 day a week. And that's not what the heart is built for, because there's just too long a layoff in between. But really, for the most part, we're talking about people want to transform their bodies. A lot of people. They want to be in better shape. There's nothing wrong with that. Typically, the better the shape that you're in, the more resilient your body is, the better the immune system. Not always, because a lot of people do that through unhealthy ways, but here's what I want to answer that question for you is this. Is it better to do 1 or 2 hard workouts a week or 3 or 4 smaller workouts if you have the same amount of time? Let's say 2 hours a week. I mean, really, when you look at it, The week's 164 hours? 7 times, 168 hours, I believe. Okay. 7 times 24. I believe that's 168. Okay. So 168 hours. Out of all of that time, you can't dedicate 2 hours? That's how I look at it. I mean, 2 hours a whole week. And I talked about this on a Mindset and Motivation Monday. I'd love to see if I can find that podcast for you. I'm going to see if I can look right now. Don't miss out on these 6 hours a day. It was episode 1186. StephenCabral.com/1186. And then the Hermetic Stressor was 1182. So you can check out those shows after this today. So think about this. Over the course of a week, you only need 2 hours. Honestly. Really, and the research shows 3, and I agree with the research. You should be exercising 3 hours a week. I agree with that. But let's say we do one of these metabolic workouts, and we do that, and we spread it over 4 days a week, more days than not, as I always talk about, you're getting huge benefits. That's 4 times a week for 30 minutes. No fooling around, all 30 minutes dedicated to exercise. Now, of course, you get to take breaks. This isn't a step aerobics class or anything. Not that there's anything wrong with step aerobics. If you enjoy that, or jazzercise, whatever you're into, it's cool. I'm okay with that. So here's the thing, though. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday, pick a weekend day. Ideally, the day that you're going to have a cheat meal or flex meal that night. Great way to do it. 30 minutes. That means you could do the 30-minute workout before you leave for work, before your kids get up in the morning. You could do it before your kids come home in the afternoon, before you have to pick them up. You could do it when you get out of work that night. But you have to pick a time. 30 minutes, 4 days a week. You could do it all at home. You could do it at the gym. Keep it simple, just like I talked about on yesterday's show with nutrition. I kept it simple. I showed you 8 foods. You can eat those foods on a daily basis. Keep it simple. Get your body healthy. Sure, it's great to rotate foods, but don't let that stop you from getting your results with just keeping it simple in the beginning. Then as you get more advanced, absolutely, you've set in a foundation. Now you can get more advanced. Same thing here. 30 minutes, 4 days a week. Could you do 40 minutes, 4 days a week? Sure, absolutely. Could you do 20 minutes of resistance training and then 20 minutes of cardio? Absolutely. But not if you can't do 30 minutes, 4 days a week. Right? That's so important to look at that. So, again, if you're asking me what's better, 1 or 2 workouts a week versus 3 to 4 30-minute workouts, hands down, it's exercising more often. Again, if we're going back to EPOC, which was today's discussion, you get the opportunity for EPOC every time you exercise. You get the opportunity for glycogen depletion every time you exercise. And if it's just once a week, not that much. Same for twice. Too many days off in a row. Even if you did a Wednesday and a Sunday, you still have off 3 days in a row when you're only doing 2 days a week. You really don't want to take more than 2 days off in a row. The metabolism is going to start to lower. So what I'd love you to do is to be able to get these 3 or 4 workouts per week. If you're doing 3, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. If you're doing 4, set up your own schedule, but just don't do 3 in a row. Space them out a little bit. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then you could do a Saturday if you wanted to. Great way to do it. A great way to stay lean, but also to boost endorphins. I don't want to, move off topic today, but keep in mind, every time you exercise, it's not just to burn calories. It's not just to boost the metabolism. It's also for the mind. You boost endorphins. It's the best antidepressant that's ever been researched and studied. And we lay off that too often. I'll talk about that more in the future. I'm not going to make that today's show, but keep in mind, if you know anyone that's low mood, if you know anyone with seasonal affective disorder, if you know anyone with any type of depression or any type of mood-based disorder, get them exercising. Get them exercising early in their day, whether it's before breakfast, after breakfast, earlier in the day. Get those endorphins pumping, get the dopamine, get the serotonin. The exercise helps with everything. Telomere lengths and anti-aging. Okay, I'm gonna stop there since this show, the topic has been covered. Hopefully that you learned something from today's show. And as always, if this topic was helpful, please do feel free to share it with anyone else you believe it could serve. Take care, everyone. I'll talk with you tomorrow. Ever wonder what the best sauna, blue blockers, sleep trackers, wake lights, salt lamps, or other health gadgets are? Or what about the top non-toxic mattresses, sheets, soaps, bath products, toothpaste, and cookware? Or would you like to know the cleanest choices for hemp parts, meal delivery services, supplements, and much more? I personally curated, researched, and now created a resource page of all of my top picks that continues to grow each week. These are the exact products I use in my own life, with my family, in my private practice, and they're the ones I trust. To find out all of my up-to-date recommendations and all the details, simply head on over to stephencabral.com/resources.